Now this, what we call development, is a very contentious term. I mean, 60 years ago, 80 years ago, there was no term like development, but we were still developing as a species. 200,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens sapien occurred.
Something else that Jay brought up, I wanted to ask all three of you, is that I think close to 200 dams built in this area. Not all built, projects which are being sanctioned or are in the process of being built. And similar in terms of even in the northeast, Arunachal, hundreds of dams. And based on what you're saying, in terms of this is relatively new mountains, they would guess, based on what you're saying, I'm guessing there's a lot of seismic tension which is there. Is that safe to have so many dams being built in this area?
I think Jay can respond better to that.
It's common sense that it is not safe, and there is enough scientific evidence to claim that it is not. If you just factor in the obvious consequences, the load of water in the reservoirs that you will have, 250 dams, nobody has quantified the total load, but it will be, again, suicidal. The Chinese studies and the Indian studies, of what I know, if you compute, the total loss of forest cover along the Himalayas will be some 17 to 18,000 square kilometer. Now that is basically shaving off the mountains. And as I pointed out earlier, that when the trees go, this kind of siltation will grow. And siltation is a process good so long it's natural. As you said, that it's very vital that it creates fertile alluvial ground downstream. But upstream, if the channels are filled up, and then the channels can't change course because every other alternative is chock-a-block with construction, then it will cause destruction. And the seismic problem, Tehri is sitting there. We were told that it would produce 2,000 plus megawatt. It produces some 400, I think. And the silt problem has stopped right now in Sutlej. Natfa Jagri is closed, and also there is another Karcham 1-2 is closed because of the silt load. So ultimately, we are not really generating power there. These dam projects appear that they are being built for mere construction sake because there is some money to be made.
There are also colossal silt harvesting structures.
Okay.
Because their bed is rising much faster than we can calculate. There's such colossal amounts of silt coming down, and you've built barriers there. Obviously, it's not just the power that Ajay was describing. Yeah. Even your water yield is going to come down, and your silt yield is going to go up, but you have no use for that silt. Because if you manage things well, that silt is useful. If you don't manage it well, it's your biggest problem.
इसमें एक और बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट ये है इंटरेस्टिंग कि टिहरी का हमारे सामने उदाहरण है, इतना ऊंचा है ये कहा जाता है कि ये करीब रेक्टर स्केल पे 9 समथिंग का ये झेल जाएगा। पर जो अभी बात हम लोग कर रहे थे कि बेसिकली पूरा का पूरा हिमालय ही बहुत अस्थिर और बहुत अभी यंग है, तो ये स्ट्रक्चर जो हमने खड़ा किया है, बांध, ये सामने दीवार, ये तो झेल जाएगा, आपका अपना बनाया हुआ है। पर जो पूरे जिस इलाके में जिस ज़मीन पर आप बना रहे हैं वही उसके लिए तैयार नहीं है, वो 5 का 6 का झेल पाएगा, यही इसी पे शक है।
And the other problem is that, as you pointed out, that the longevity of the project is reduced drastically because the reservoir fills up, and then after 10 years you will see that there is not enough water to produce power. That's one part. The other part is that they claim that these dams structurally they're earthquake proof up to 8-9 to Richter scale. But again, if we apply common sense, and there are examples in Europe that in such seismic landscape, the river itself may change course. You are holding water because you have put a barrier on the river course to have a reservoir. If the dam may hold, but if the river changes course, then there is no water. So the entire project goes bad. And the third risk, which happened in Italy 60 years back, even if the dam holds, if there is a big earthquake, there can be an enormous landslide, which may drop in the reservoir and cause oversplash.
Yeah.
And if such oversplash happens, then despite the dam structure holding, everything downstream can be washed off.
And one thing that's come out is a lot of the debate right now is, and people are saying that yes, we want to be eco-friendly, yes, we want to protect the environment, but not at the cost of development. And that across the board, whenever dams come up, everyone says you can't stop development. Environment is great, but you can't stop development. It benefits the people. What's your take on that? I mean, benefits the people, can't stop development. How do you balance it?
Well, if you look at Uttarakhand, The best way to develop Uttarakhand is to not spend any money on it. If you stop the investment into development in Uttarakhand, it will find very good ways to develop because people have been living there for hundreds of years. It's essentially about figuring out the ways they had learned over the years. It's not that they had some kind of a magical revelation because they were living close to Char Dham. They would have figured these things out because community after community would have watched flood after flood, monsoon after monsoon. And after that, they would have figured out the ways to survive in those areas. Now, these systems are still around. They haven't all vanished. And these systems point the way to develop this area in a way that we can survive, we can prosper. The best way to understand an area is to go and ask. We had all these news reports about water flooding the T3. We don't have an airport in Delhi, we have the T3. So there was water flooding T3. There's a little village very close to that. Before these people built the airport, they could have gone and asked some old guy sitting over there and smoking his hookah. He would have told them that, listen, water flows this way. I've been seeing that since I was a child. They didn't do that. We have our award-winning airport underwater. Why? Because we forget to ask people who live there.
Like I agree with Sopan, but I mean, if I was to look at it from a consumerist point of view, I want to go on a yatra, I want to go to the temple. For that I need a road to get there, I need a hotel to stay. If you say that, okay, we've got to wait and watch, see how it is, that means maybe in my lifetime I won't get to go.
No.
How do I do it?
Not really. The problem is that we have a uniform idea of lifestyle. Whether we go to a forest or to mountains or to a sea beach, we have one notion and concept of a good stay. That's very ridiculous. For hundreds of years, people have lived differently in different zones. Now, if you want to go to a forest in the Western Ghats and you want air conditioning, you have no business being there. So similarly, if you're going to the Char Dham, to Gangotri, then you should be living like the locals do.
Yeah.
And if you do that, I don't see any problem if you have hundreds of temporary makeshift arrangements and you go and stay there. You don't build concrete structures and put AC and the load on the mountain. So this kind of demand, the lifestyle demand, this is the first problem. And going back to the other question asked about the development, they all factor in the loss. Do you think that the hotels, this time I think the rough estimates they gave, I think there will be more, 70 hotels were washed away.
Yeah.
Do you think these guys did not factor in the loss? That if I go and build there is a chance in 3-4 years my property will go. In Ramnagar, on Corbett, the plush resorts, they all build their swimming pools bang on Kosi. It's fantastic. You can have a dip and you can watch the river. Every 2 years, all the swimming pools are washed away. Do you think they're mad? They factor in the cost, and the cost is passed on to the client. Now, it's not really development. It's a pure case of greed. You're using something knowing that it's short-lived, and the same thing happens to these dams and power projects. Government tells them that you will have a tax holiday for 30 years, 40 years, and then we will take over the project.
Yeah.
It's pure hogwash. No project in the Himalayas, because of the siltation, will have a life beyond 30 years. So the project proponents are making it, investing money, getting full return, knowing that giving it over to the government after 30 years is just on paper, because the project won't be viable. So the point I'm trying to make is that the cost, the environmental cost, which has economic spin-off, is always factored in this so-called development rush. Nobody is actually losing money there. They're only making money.
Atul, I wanted to ask you, I mean, over the hundreds of kilometers that you traveled, I mean, three of you sitting here seem to have the knowledge to tell us that this is something that was going to happen. I mean, we've made the mistakes. Did you find that the government officials, different bodies studying the river knew this before and have just ignored it and continued?
हाँ, ये इसमें तो कोई, अब जैसे वहाँ पे मैं मिला पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड और ये यमुना एक्शन प्लान वहाँ पे इन लोगों को, तो पता तो सबको ही है, उसमें ये कोई ऐसी चीज़ नहीं है कि किसी को दिख नहीं रही। यहाँ पे आपने 10 mld का वो सीवेज ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट लगाया हुआ है और उसके बगल से सारा सीवर बिना किसी ट्रीटमेंट के यमुना में बह रहा है, वो तो प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। अच्छा, ये जो डेवलपमेंट और इसकी बात है, इसमें एक चीज़ ये है ना कि लेने और देने का हिसाब है। अगर केवल लेने देने और इसी टर्म में सोचा जाए तो आप कितना ले रहे हैं और कितना वापस कर रहे हैं, केवल लेना नहीं होता। हिमालय के टर्म में या नदियों के टर्म में या वहाँ पे जो हो रहा है उसमें क्या है कि हम केवल अभी मतलब जितने भी रिसोर्सेज हैं उसमें लेने की ही कोशिश हो रही है। जो अभी बहुत बवाल चला इको सेंसिटिव जोन को लेके, इको सेंसिटिव जोन को ये बताया गया कि ये आम आदमी के लिए बहुत वो है, और ये उत्तराखंड की बात है जहाँ ये सारी प्रॉब्लम हुई, इसी इलाके में इको सेंसिटिव जोन बनाने का चल रहा है कि इको सेंसिटिव जोन बनाना है इसको। और यहाँ पे ये तो लोगों ने हल्ला किया कि आम आदमी को परेशानी होगी, ये लोग जो जंगलों पे डिपेंड है उनको ये सब। तो इसके पीछे मतलब बहुत इतनी सारी पॉलिटिक्स है कि उसको देखने के बाद आपका मन ऐसे ही खिन्न हो जाता है कि वो लोग हैं इसका विरोध कर रहे हैं, जो लोग जिनके की इंटरेस्ट है वहाँ पे, जो स्टोन क्रशिंग कर रहे हैं, या जिनके अपने जंगलों पे जो सारे लोग जो उसका दोहन कर रहे हैं बेसिकली। अब बाकी जो केवल नेचुरली जंगल पे डिपेंड है थोड़ी सी अपनी लकड़ी के लिए या अपने खाने के लिए या वहाँ पे, उनके लिए तो मतलब वनाधिकार कानून और वो छोटी छोटी चीज़ें हैं जो उनको उतना दे ही रही। लेकिन इसको उड़ा के और जो बड़े लोग अपना हिस्सा दे रहे हैं उसमें बड़ा नुकसान हो रहा है। अब वो पूरा का पूरा मामला पेंडिंग पड़ा है। अब आप उसमें दुनिया भर की अपनी वो एक्टिविटीज़ चला रहे हैं लोग, बड़े लोग। अब उसको इको सेंसिटिव जोन क्यों नहीं होना चाहिए किसी को समझ में नहीं।
The best thing about a political system is it doesn't allow anybody to become a tyrant over time. We have the ability to throw people out of power. That's the best thing about it. Now to expect everything from the political system, I think, is a bit much. I think it's